Barcelona, 2007. The Camp Nou is quiet, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that feels like something has died. Just 2 years earlier, this same stadium had vibrated with samba rhythms and thunderous chants. A smiling Brazilian danced defenders into humiliation. A Cameroonian warrior screamed toward the sky after every goal. And a Portuguese architect orchestrated chaos into beauty. They were called the Amigos. But behind the goals, the trophies, and the magic, the civil war was brewing. Reports began to surface. Late nights. Missed training. Players arriving smelling of alcohol. Dressing room factions. Boardroom politics splitting the squad in two. And then came the unthinkable moment. Against Racing Santander in February 2007. Samuel Eto'o, Barcelona's top striker, refused to come on as a substitute. The cameras caught it. The world watched it. The crack was no longer hidden. The question was, what had happened to the trio that once resurrected a fallen giant? How did friendship turn into silence? How did the savior, the brain, and the warrior fall apart? And why, years later, in a Paraguayan prison cell, would the warrior become the one man who refused to let the savior fall alone? This is the story of Ronaldinho, Deco, and Samuel Eto'o. This is the story of how they built modern Barcelona, and how it almost destroyed them. This isn't just a story about football. It's a Shakespearean tragedy played out in shorts and studs. It's a story of how the greatest team on earth became a black sheep sanctuary. How a boardroom civil war poisoned a locker room, and how the man who refused to play eventually became the only man who cared enough to save his brother from a prison cell. This is the untold documentary of the three Amigos. The rise, the rot, and the redemption. To understand the fall, you have to understand the desperation of the beginning. In 2003, FC Barcelona was a giant in a coma. They hadn't won a trophy in 4 years. They were broken, and living in the shadow of Real Madrid's Galacticos. Then came the savior. Ronaldinho Gaucho. He was a player forged in the sun-drenched streets of Porto Alegre, Brazil, with a smile as dazzling as his footwork. Barcelona paid PSG a hefty sum. An investment in joy, in the audacious belief that football could be fun again. He wasn't just a signing, he was a statement. From his very first touch, a blurring of feet that left defenders bewildered, to his iconic celebration, the Shaka sign, a symbol of good vibes. Ronaldinho was a revelation. He played with an infectious freedom, a street dancer on the pitch, turning prosaic passes into works of art. His God found their sorcerer. The following year, 2004, saw two more crucial arrivals. The first was Anderson Luis de Souza, better known as Deco. A Portuguese international, born in Brazil. Deco was the antithesis of Ronaldinho's flamboyant style. He was the coiled spring, the engine room, the tactical maestro. Purchased from Porto, where he had just won the Champions League under Jose Mourinho. Deco brought a steely determination and an unparalleled footballing intelligence. He was the pivot, the link between defense and attack. A relentless presser who won back possession. And an incisive passer who carved open defenses with surgical precision. If Ronaldinho was the artist, Deco was the architect, designing the spaces for the magic to unfold. He was the quiet leader. The one who understood the rhythm of the game, pulling the strings from deep within midfield. Frank Rijkaard, the new manager, knew he needed a brain to complement the existing flair. Deco was that brain. And then there was Samuel Eto'o Fils. Signed from Mallorca, after a protracted transfer saga involving Real Madrid. Eto'o arrived with a chip on his shoulder and a burning desire to prove himself. He was a force of nature, a predatory striker with blistering pace, an insatiable work ethic, and an uncompromising will to win. He wasn't just a goalscorer, he was a defender from the front, a relentless harasser of opposition backlines. His celebration, a quick burst of energy and a pointed finger to the sky, spoke of his single-minded focus. Eto'o was the warrior, the spearhead of the attack, the one who would run through brick walls for the team. He brought a ferocity that Barcelona had lacked, a ruthless edge to their beautiful game. Individually, they were stars. Together, they were destined for legend. The alchemy was immediate, almost miraculous. Under Frank Rijkaard, Barcelona began to play a brand of football that was both exhilarating and effective. The 2004-2005 season saw them clinch La Liga, their first title in 6 years. But it was the 2005-2006 season that truly etched their names into the annals of football history. Ronaldinho, Deco, and Eto'o formed the spine of a team that played with an effortless synergy. Ronaldinho's audacious dribbles and no-look passes found Deco, who would orchestrate the tempo, feeding through balls to the tireless Eto'o. It was a symphony of movement, skill, and sheer predatory instinct. Then came the pact. "You run," Ronaldinho told Eto'o. "I'll find you." And he did. Blind through balls. Curved crosses. Passes defenders couldn't see but Eto'o could feel. It wasn't rehearsed. It was instinct. Deco completed the triangle. When Brazilian improvisation threatened chaos, Deco restored order. He dropped deeper. He covered spaces. He calmed tempers. The dressing room had factions: Brazilians, Spaniards, others. Deco stood in the middle. He translated not just language, but culture. The pinnacle of this era came in May 2006, when Barcelona lifted the Champions League trophy in Paris, defeating Arsenal. Eto'o scored the crucial equalizer. They were at the summit of European football, an unstoppable force, a band of brothers who conquered all. Success, sometimes, can be a harsher mistress than failure. The euphoria of the double-winning season of 2006 began to fade, replaced by a subtle, then undeniable, complacency. The relentless drive that characterized their ascent started to wane, particularly among some of the key figures. Whispers began circulating within the club and eventually seeped into the press of a growing indiscipline. Ronaldinho, ever the party animal, found his revelry increasing. Deco, a more reserved personality, seemed to be increasingly drawn into Ronaldinho's orbit. Stories emerged of them arriving at training sessions looking less than fresh, sometimes even still under the influence. The joyous freedom that had defined Dinho's play started to look like a lack of professionalism. A clique began to form around Ronaldinho and Deco. Players who enjoyed the nightlife, who were less committed to the strict regimen of professional football, gravitated towards them. This created a divisive atmosphere within the squad. While some players remained dedicated, others, emboldened by the perceived impunity of the star duo, started to slack off. Eto'o, who was a fierce competitor and a professional to his core, focused on his fitness, his diet, his performance. He saw the perceived lack of professionalism from Ronaldinho and Deco as a direct threat to the team's success and to his own aspirations. He trained harder, spoke out more, and becoming increasingly frustrated as he saw his professionalism being undermined by their partying. He believed in giving 100% every single day, and the casual attitude of his amigos was an affront to his principles. Adding another layer to Eto'o's simmering resentment was the 2005 Ballon d'Or. Ronaldinho, deservedly, won it. However, Eto'o, after an incredible season, came in third, behind Frank Lampard. While outwardly he congratulated his friend, privately, he felt a sting of frustration. His comment, widely reported, was, "I hope next year they give the award for the best African player, because if not, I don't know what more I have to do." It was a moment that revealed Eto'o's deep-seated ambition and his belief that his immense contributions were sometimes overlooked. Ronaldinho, in a typically jovial but perhaps subtly dismissive tone, merely replied with a smile, "Samuel knows I value him. The team comes first." This small exchange, while seemingly innocuous, subtly highlighted a growing disparity in their perceptions of their individual contributions and the recognition they felt they deserved. Adding fuel to the fire within the dressing room was a bitter power struggle at the highest echelons of the club. The presidency of Joan Laporta, initially hailed as a breath of fresh air, became increasingly fraught with internal dissent. His relationship with his vice president, Sandro Rosell, who had been instrumental in bringing Ronaldinho to Barcelona, deteriorated spectacularly. This board-level feud had a devastating ripple effect on the squad. Players were implicitly, and sometimes explicitly, forced to choose sides. Ronaldinho and Deco, whose arrivals were heavily associated with Rosell, were seen as being in his camp. Eto'o, along with players like Carles Puyol and Xavi, was seen as aligning with Laporta and the more traditional club values. The dressing room, once a sanctuary, became a political battlefield, each faction eyeing the other with suspicion. The Amigos were no longer just teammates, they were symbols in a larger power struggle, their friendship an unfortunate casualty of boardroom politics. The simmering tensions finally boiled over in February 2007, during a Liga match against Racing Santander. Barcelona was struggling, and Frank Rijkaard decided he needed to make a substitution to inject some urgency. Samuel Eto'o, who had been out injured for an extended period, was on the bench, itching to play. Rijkaard called him over, signaling for him to warm up. But Eto'o refused. In a moment of pure, unadulterated defiance, Eto'o waved his hand, shook his head, and remained seated. He later claimed he was not properly warmed up, but the message was clear: a player of his stature felt disrespected. He believed he was being brought on as an afterthought, perhaps even as a scapegoat. The camera zoomed in on the coach's bewildered face, and then on Eto'o's stone-cold expression. It was an unprecedented act of rebellion. Rijkaard, a man known for his calm demeanor, was visibly shaken. But it was Ronaldinho's subsequent comments that twisted the knife. When asked about Eto'o's refusal, Ronaldinho publicly stated, "It's the coach's decision, and if a player doesn't want to come on, then it's a lack of respect for the coach and the whole team." These words, from his supposed amigo, landed like a bomb. For Eto'o, it was the ultimate betrayal. The public criticism from a teammate, especially one he considered a friend, was a wound that would never fully heal. The friendship, once a beacon of unity, was now irrevocably broken. The 2007 season was a slow, painful death for the glorious era of the Amigos. The club descended into chaos. The dressing room, once alive with laughter and the vibrant energy of exceptional talent, became a tomb of silence and resentment. The trio allegedly stopped communicating entirely. Ronaldinho and Deco continued their nocturnal escapades, their performances on the pitch becoming increasingly inconsistent. Eto'o, meanwhile, became more withdrawn. His fiery intensity was now channeled into a quiet, simmering anger. Results plummeted. Barcelona finished a distant third in La Liga, well behind Real Madrid and Villarreal, and crashed out of the Champions League. The Dutchman, Frank Rijkaard, lost control of the dressing room. He found himself powerless to stem the tide of indiscipline and fractured relationships. His reign was obviously coming to an end. The Camp Nou, once a theatre of dreams, now echoed with boos and discontent. The fans, who had adored Ronaldinho for his infectious joy, now grew impatient with his perceived lack of effort and his increasingly frequent injuries. Deco too, once the relentless engine, seemed to have lost his spark. Only Eto'o, despite his personal frustrations, continued to give his all, scoring crucial goals, but even his efforts couldn't salvage a season consumed by internal strife. The summer of 2008 brought a seismic shift. Joan Laporta, recognizing the urgent need for radical change, made a bold and controversial decision. He appointed Pep Guardiola as the new head coach. Guardiola, a product of La Masia, a former captain, and a man steeped in the club's philosophy, had only coached the Barcelona B team for a single season. It was a huge gamble. But Guardiola arrived with a clear vision and an iron will. He understood that talent alone was not enough. Discipline, hard work, and an unwavering commitment to the collective were paramount. He was not just a coach, he was a revolutionary, a dictator of discipline. His mandate was clear. Clean house. No player, no matter how famous, how talented, how instrumental in past glories, would be exempt from his new regime. The message was unmistakable. The party was over. Guardiola wasted no time. At his very first press conference as head coach, Pep did something unheard of. He publicly executed the careers of the club's biggest icons. He stated, "We are forming a squad, and Ronaldinho, Deco, and Eto'o are not in my mind." It was a public execution. No sentimentality, no lingering doubts. He didn't elaborate on the reasons, he didn't need to. Everyone understood. Their lifestyles, their perceived lack of professionalism, their role in the black sheep culture, it all led to this moment. They were symbols of an era that had ended, and Guardiola was tearing down the old to build the new. The club needed to move on, and to do that, its most famous, and now most problematic, stars had to go. Ronaldinho would be sold to AC Milan, Deco to Chelsea. The architects of Barcelona's renaissance were unceremoniously jettisoned. Eto'o survived. Why? Eto'o looked Pep in the eye and refused to leave. He outworked everyone in pre-season. He showed Pep that while the others had lost their fire, his was still burning. Eto'o stayed for one more year, spearheading the 2009 treble, before he too was cast out. Guardiola, knowing Eto'o's strong personality would eventually clash with his absolute control, sold him to Inter Milan the following summer, bringing in Zlatan Ibrahimovic. It was a business decision, but also a final act of closure on the era of the Amigos. Fast forward 12 years. The lights of the Camp Nou are a lifetime away. Ronaldinho, the man who once had the world at his feet, is sitting in a Paraguayan prison for using a fake passport. He is broken. He has no money, most of his friends from the party days have disappeared. The first person that came through for him was a certain Samuel Eto'o. Eto'o reached out, not with judgment, but with unconditional support. In the end, the football world remembers them for who they were. The three amigos are a what-if that haunts Barcelona. What if they had stayed disciplined? What if the politics hadn't intervened? They could have won 5 Champions Leagues in a row. But perhaps the ending we got is more beautiful. It's a reflection that in the high-stakes, ego-driven world of elite sports, the scars are real, but they aren't permanent.